They expected flags. That was the first mistake. When the Galactic Security Council sent their summons to Earth, they imagined a response drenched in ceremony. Towering admirals in decorated uniforms, dramatic speeches about honor, and threats disguised as diplomacy. That was how things were done in the galaxy. Power was loud. Authority announced itself. War, when it came, always came with a warning. Earth answered with silence. No grand fleet appeared on the edge of known space, no broadcast echoed through the hyperlanes, no fiery declaration filled the Council's halls. For several long weeks, humanity simply did nothing. And that silence made the Council uneasy, because in the galaxy's long memory, silence never meant weakness. The Galactic Security Council was old, older than most stars with names. Its chamber floated in orbit around a dead white sun, a monument to permanence and control. Species from across the spiral arms gathered there, beings of light and chitin, metal and flesh, ancient minds housed in bodies that had forgotten fear. They had ruled for a long time, and they were not used to being ignored. Earth had become a problem slowly, too slowly to notice at first, a minor death world species, classified as high-risk, low-priority. Humans fought among themselves constantly, burned their own atmosphere, and somehow survived catastrophes that wiped out more stable civilizations. They should have destroyed themselves. Instead, they adapted. Human trade ships began appearing in contested zones. Human engineers repaired stations abandoned as unsalvageable. Human mercenaries won battles they were statistically supposed to lose, and then refused payment in exchange for evacuation of civilians. That was the second mistake. Humans didn't behave like conquerors. They behaved like something worse: professionals. When Earth's influence reached the edge of Council-controlled space, the High Delegates decided it was time to remind humanity of its place. They sent an ultimatum. Not a threat, at least not officially, a request. Earth was instructed to send representatives to the Council chamber, high-ranking military leaders, strategists, generals, individuals authorized to negotiate Earth's submission into the Council's security framework. In simpler terms, surrender your independence or be classified as hostile. The Council expected resistance. They expected speeches. They expected outrage. They did not expect Earth's reply. The message was short, unencrypted, almost informal. We acknowledge receipt. Representatives will arrive as requested. No titles, no demands, no conditions. The Council relaxed. That was the third mistake. On the day of arrival, the chamber was full. Delegates gathered behind shimmering barriers, each species observing through the lens of its own superiority. Some came to gloat, others to study a future enemy. A few, quietly, came to learn. The Council doors opened. No honor guard marched in, no banners unfurled. 5 humans entered the chamber. They wore no medals, no ceremonial armor, just simple dark uniforms, unmarked, unadorned, functional, the kind worn by people who didn't need recognition to know what they were capable of. They didn't look impressive. That unsettled everyone. The lead human was an older man, gray at the temples, calm eyes. He walked like someone who understood exactly where every threat in the room was and had already dismissed them. He stopped at the center of the chamber and waited. Didn't bow, didn't salute, just waited. The High Chancellor spoke first, voice amplified by harmonic resonance. "State your rank," it commanded. The human smiled slightly. "I don't have one," he said. A ripple of confusion passed through the delegates. "You were instructed to send generals," the Chancellor said coldly. The human nodded. "We know." "Then why are you here?" The man glanced briefly at the 4 humans behind him. They stood relaxed, hands loosely clasped, eyes quietly scanning, not nervous, not defiant, prepared. "Because you asked for leadership," the man replied, "and Earth sent people who get things done." That was the moment the room changed. Several counselors laughed, actual laughter, clicks, pulses, chemical flares of amusement. To them, this was arrogance from a primitive species that didn't understand the rules. "You insult this council," one delegate hissed. "You arrive without hierarchy, without authority." The human's smile didn't fade. "Authority," he said, "is useful when you need people to follow you." A pause. "Professionals don't need that." Silence spread through the chamber. The council had seen bravado before, but this wasn't bravado. There was no emotional spike, no biological stress markers. The human's vitals, monitored discreetly by council sensors, were calm, controlled, dangerously so. The High Chancellor leaned forward. "Earth's expansion violates council stability accords." "Correct," the human replied. "You interfere in conflicts beyond your jurisdiction." "Yes, you undermine deterrence through restraint." The human nodded again. "That tends to upset bullies." The temperature in the chamber dropped slightly. "This council commands fleets capable of extinguishing your species," the High Chancellor warned. The human finally sighed. "There it is," he said softly. "The threat." He looked up. "Do you want to talk or do you want to posture?" No one had ever spoken to the council like that, not and survived. Behind the scenes, council analysts were growing nervous. Human ships, unarmed, civilian class, had begun appearing near council borders, not violating them, just waiting. Medical vessels, engineering platforms, logistics carriers. No weapons charged, no shields raised, just presence. The kind that said, "We planned for this." The kind that made generals uncomfortable. Because generals understood something politicians didn't. Wars weren't won by loud people. They were won by the ones who prepared quietly. Back in the chamber, the Chancellor made a decision. "You will submit to council oversight, or Earth will be designated a hostile entity." The human representative tilted his head. "Is that your final position?" "It is." The man nodded once. Understood. He tapped a small device on his wrist. Nothing exploded, no alarms rang. That was the most terrifying part. Across council space, systems began reporting anomalies. Supply depots discovered their inventory records corrected, efficiently reorganized. Fuel shortages quietly resolved by unknown hands. Pirate activity dropped to zero in sectors where human ships had passed. No battles, no declarations, just problems disappearing. Council commanders grew angry. Council admirals grew confused. Council intelligence grew afraid. Because Earth hadn't sent generals, they had sent people who solved problems so thoroughly that conflict became irrelevant. The human representative looked back up at the council. "You asked for generals," he said calmly. "We don't use them unless we want to make a point." A pause. "This," he gestured, "around the chamber, is not that kind of situation." The implication hung in the air like a blade. And somewhere deep in the council's ancient archives, a warning classification quietly updated itself. Species, human. Threat level, unknown. Engagement recommendation, do not provoke. The council chamber did not erupt into shouting. That surprised everyone. Instead, something far more dangerous filled the room. Calculation. The Galactic Security Council had survived for millennia by knowing when to crush threats and when to study them first. Humanity had just crossed an invisible line, not into open defiance, not into submission, into uncertainty. And uncertainty scared ancient powers more than rebellion ever could. Behind their expressionless facades, council analysts were scrambling. Human ships were not acting like fleets. They didn't patrol, they didn't posture, they didn't even move in predictable formations. They appeared near supply routes, near unstable systems, near regions already stretched thin. Then they stayed, sometimes for days, sometimes for hours. And when they left, something had changed. Pirate groups vanished overnight without distress signals. Border conflicts simply ended. Not with explosions, but with treaties signed by parties who swore no negotiations had taken place. It was as if the humans were fighting a war no one could see. Back in the chamber, the High Chancellor spoke again, more carefully this time. "You interfere in matters beyond your authority," it said. "You disrupt balances that have held for centuries." The human representative nodded slowly. "Balances that benefit you," he replied. A pause. "Not the people living under them." The Chancellor's eyes narrowed. "You presume moral authority." The human shook his head. "No," he said. "We apply professional standards." That word again, professional. It echoed unpleasantly among the delegates. One counselor leaned forward, voice sharp with irritation. "If you are not generals, then what exactly are you?" The human didn't answer immediately. He reached into his pocket and placed a small object on the floor between them. It was old, metallic, scarred. A dog tag. "This belonged to my grandfather," he said quietly. "He fought in a war Earth lost." Some delegates shifted, confused by the personal disclosure. "He wasn't a hero," he continued. "He wasn't famous. He wasn't even particularly brave." The man looked up. "He was trained, prepared, reliable." A beat. "He did his job, and he made sure others came home." The four humans behind him stood a little straighter, not out of pride, but recognition. "That," the man said, "is what we are." The council attempted escalation. Sanctions were declared, trade lanes were restricted, human access to council-controlled resources was suspended. On paper, it was devastating. In reality, it did almost nothing. Human logistics teams rerouted supply chains within days. Independent worlds, previously ignored by the council, quietly opened ports to human ships. Repairs, food distribution, medical support, all provided without demands. Humans didn't replace the council's influence, they exposed how fragile it was. Something worse happened. Council military advisors began requesting human assistance, quietly, off the record. A border war between two client species had been burning for decades. Human professionals arrived, not as commanders, but as advisors. The war ended in 6 weeks. No decisive battle, no genocide, just communication lines restored, supply inequities corrected, and leadership removed through administrative failure. Council generals were furious. Council soldiers were impressed. In the chamber, the chancellor tried a different tactic. "You undermine deterrence," it said. "Fear maintains order." The humans sighed. "That's where you're wrong," he replied. He looked around the chamber, meeting the gaze of beings who had ruled through intimidation for longer than his species existed. Fear creates silence, not stability. Another pause. Silence breaks the moment someone stops being afraid. The implication landed hard. Council intelligence finally delivered the report they had been dreading. Humans weren't preparing for war. They had already prepared for everything. Contingency plans existed for council embargoes, fleet mobilizations, even planetary strikes. Civilian evacuation protocols were embedded in trade contracts. Redundant communication networks used physics the council barely understood. Humans didn't react. They absorbed pressure, and pressure made them better. One of the older council species, an observer who had not spoken in centuries, finally addressed the chamber. "You are not conquerors, nor are you rebels." The human representative inclined his head respectfully. "Correct." "What are you then?" the being asked. The human considered the question. "We're what happens," he said, "when survival stops being enough." The chamber fell quiet. Outside, human ships began departing council space, not fleeing, finishing,
Each departure left behind a system that ran smoother, fairer, quieter than before. The Council realized too late that humans hadn't come to challenge authority. They had come to demonstrate irrelevance, and that was far more dangerous. As the humans turned to leave, the Chancellor called out one last time. "If you continue this path," it warned, "you will force this council to respond." The human paused at the doorway. He didn't turn around. "That's fine," he said. "A beat. But understand this." Now he did turn, just slightly. "When Earth sends generals," he said calmly, "you'll know." And with that, the professionals walked away, leaving the galaxy to wonder what kind of war only begins after the experts are done.
The Council did not announce its response. It never did. Power, when it believes itself unquestioned, prefers silence before violence. 3 cycles after the humans withdrew from the chamber, the first move was made, not with fleets, not with declarations, but with pressure. Invisible, precise, suffocating. Human financial nodes across council space began to fail simultaneously. Insurance networks collapsed. Cargo vessels were denied docking clearance mid-flight. Banking AIs flagged human transactions as non-compliant species risk. It was elegant, legal, devastating on paper. The Council called it administrative correction. On Earth, they called it Tuesday. Within minutes, human logistics officers rerouted trade through non-aligned systems. Cargo ships changed flags digitally while still in transit. Payments switched to decentralized quantum ledgers the Council couldn't freeze because they didn't understand where they physically existed. No emergency meetings, no panic, just quiet execution. That was the first sign the Council had made a mistake. The second sign was worse. Council-aligned border militias began receiving anonymous intelligence leaks, supply corruption, leadership embezzlement, manufactured conflicts designed to justify prolonged deployments. None of it was classified. All of it was true. Within weeks, 3 regional governors were removed by internal review. 2 military commanders resigned under pressure from their own troops. The Council accused humans of subversion. The humans didn't deny it. They didn't confirm it either. A junior council strategist finally asked the question everyone had been avoiding. If they are not attacking, what is their objective? No one answered, because the data was unsettling. Where humans operated, violence decreased, civilian survival rates increased, long-term stability metrics improved. Human presence didn't escalate conflict, it dissolved it. And that was something the Council had no doctrine for. Then came the first military incident. A Council patrol flotilla entered the Tarsus Drift, a system recently stabilized by human professionals. Officially, they were conducting an inspection. Unofficially, it was a provocation. The human ships didn't retreat. They didn't form up. They didn't even power weapons. They simply stayed. Council commanders demanded identification. The human reply was immediate. Logistics team, conflict resolution detachment, hazard containment. That system is under Council authority, the commander snapped. Correct, and currently experiencing an 82% reduction in casualty rates. A pause. Request denied. The Council commander ordered the ships seized. That was the moment everything changed. Human vessels did not fire. Instead, Council sensors went blind, not destroyed, desynchronized. 30 targeting solutions returned nonsense. Thrusters misfired by fractions of degrees, just enough to make coordinated movement impossible. Communications lagged unpredictably. No explosions, no casualties, just helplessness. Human vessels moved through the formation with surgical calm. Boarding teams crossed over, not heavily armed, not shouting commands. They disabled control nodes, secured weapon systems, and escorted crews to safe compartments. Professional, controlled, humiliating. The incident lasted 12 minutes. 12 minutes in which an entire Council flotilla was neutralized without a single fatality. Then the humans left.
They returned the ships, intact, functional, with a detailed report of every system's vulnerability attached. The council erupted. This time the chamber did fill with shouting. That was an act of war. They violated sovereign military assets. They exposed council weakness. The High Chancellor said nothing. It stared at the footage, again and again, watching human personnel move with precision that bordered on indifference. They weren't angry. They weren't emotional. They were efficient. Human military analysts finally admitted the truth. Human doctrine did not revolve around domination. It revolved around control without escalation. They didn't seek decisive battles. They sought irreversible advantages. A senior war theorist summarized it best. Generals aim to win wars. These humans aim to make wars unnecessary. The implication chilled the chamber. In response, the Council authorized Operation Final Authority, full mobilization. This time, no shadows, no deniability. They would remind the galaxy who held power. Entire battle groups began moving. Star systems trembled under warp wakes. Ancient warships awakened from orbital crypts. Species that had not fought in centuries were conscripted overnight. The Council expected fear. They expected submission. What they got was hesitation. Independent worlds began refusing Council orders. Trade hubs delayed military shipments. Border systems closed jump gates for maintenance. Some species quietly requested human mediation instead of Council arbitration. The Council realized something horrifying. Their authority had not been challenged. It had been replaced. Human command received the mobilization data in silence. No alarms, no speeches. A single message was sent to all deployed human teams. Phase 3, professional containment. That was all. Human fleets repositioned, not towards Council space, but around key infrastructure, supply routes, refueling hubs, communications relays. They didn't blockade, they optimized. Council fleets found themselves well-armed and slowly starving. A Council admiral finally transmitted a direct challenge. "If you wish to fight, then fight us." The human response was immediate. "We already are." As Council ships drifted, low on resources, surrounded by systems that no longer obeyed Council command, something finally broke. Not morale, pride. The Council realized the truth far too late. Earth hadn't sent generals because generals seek victory. Earth had sent professionals, and professionals don't fight wars. They end systems that require them. Somewhere deep in Council space, the High Chancellor whispered a question no one answered. How, it asked, when they decide we are the problem? And for the first time in its ancient existence, the Galactic Council was afraid.
The Council did what ancient powers always do when control begins to slip. They escalated publicly. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council issued an open declaration, broadcast across every major system, translated into every known language. It wasn't a call to arms. It was a warning. Humanity, the Chancellor's voice echoed, layered with synthetic authority, has overstepped its mandate. Under the guise of professional assistance, they have disrupted lawful governance, interfered with sovereign fleets, and undermined galactic stability. The message paused, calculated for impact. Effective immediately, Earth and all affiliated forces are designated a destabilizing entity. Not an enemy. Not yet. A prelude. The declaration ended with something far more dangerous than a threat. A promise. If humanity does not withdraw from Council space, the Chancellor concluded, we will restore order by all necessary means. Across Earth's command centers, the broadcast played in silence. No one reacted. No one argued. They had expected this. Commander Hale, one of the senior operational coordinators, finally spoke. They're framing us. A strategist nodded. They need legitimacy before force. Another officer exhaled slowly. They're going to make an example. Hale's expression didn't change. Of who?
he asked. The answer came within hours. A neutral system. Small, unaligned, no human personnel present. Just convenient. Council fleets entered the Kalar system under the banner of restoring stability. They cited unrest, insurgency, smuggling. The real objective was simpler. Demonstration. Orbital platforms were seized. Local defense craft were disarmed. When planetary authorities protested, the Council invoked emergency jurisdiction. Then came the bombardment. Limited, controlled, surgical, enough to be visible, enough to be undeniable. Millions watched as a once neutral world burned, not annihilated, but scarred. Infrastructure destroyed, atmosphere compromised. Civilian casualties framed as unfortunate, but necessary. The message was clear. This is what happens when you stand near humanity. For the first time, human command reacted publicly. But not with threats, with questions. A single transmission was sent. Open channel. No encryption. Broadcast galaxy-wide. "This is Earth," the voice said. "Calm. Human. Unremarkable. We are requesting clarification." A pause. Was Kalar attacked because it posed a threat, or because you needed someone to bleed? The Council did not respond. They couldn't, because every species watching knew the answer. Human teams mobilized, not fleets. Professionals. Search and rescue units, medical corps, atmospheric engineers, infrastructure specialists. They entered Kalar space without escort. No weapons hot. No formation. Just purpose. Council patrols moved to intercept. They never reached them. Navigation failures, supply errors, accidental rerouting through unstable gravity zones. No shots fired. Just obstacles appearing exactly where needed. On the surface, humans worked without ceremony. They rebuild power grids while fires still burned. They seal atmospheric breaches under falling debris. They evacuated civilians through corridors of temporary gravity stabilization. Not fast, not flashy, relentless. A Kalar child was pulled from rubble by a human medic wearing a suit patched so many times its original color was unrecognizable. The image spread faster than any broadcast. Council propaganda attempted to reframe it. Human interference complicates recovery. But the numbers betrayed them. Human-led recovery zones had lower death rates, higher stability, fewer riots. That's when the Council made its final mistake. They targeted the professionals directly. A Council strike group entered a human-operated stabilization corridor. Their justification was clean: unauthorized military presence. The reality was brutal. The strike was precise. 3 human ships disabled, 1 shattered. No escape pods, no survivors. The galaxy went silent. Not in fear, in waiting. Human command received the casualty report. Names, roles, specializations. None of them were soldiers. Engineers, medics, logistics officers, professionals. For the first time since humanity re-entered galactic affairs, Earth paused. Not to grieve, to decide. Commander Hale stood alone in the command chamber, staring at the casualty list. "They crossed the line," someone whispered. Hale nodded once. "Yes," he said quietly, "but not the one they think." Orders went out. Not to fleets, to systems. Council supply depots began failing, simultaneously, perfectly. Fuel spoiled, ammunition misaligned, navigation updates corrupted. Not enough to destroy, just enough to make everything unreliable. Council warships became expensive paperweights. Then came the message. Private. Direct. To the High Chancellor. "You killed professionals," the human voice said. "People whose job was to prevent exactly this." A pause. "You don't get to frame this as war anymore." Another pause. "This is now accountability." The human fleet did not advance.
Council space did not burn. Instead, everything stopped working. Trade froze. Defense grids went off for safety recalibration. Communication relays experienced cascading latency failures. No violence, no explosions, just paralysis. The Council realized too late what the humans had done. They hadn't attacked the Council. They had removed its ability to function. Species began leaving, not defecting, withdrawing, because alignment with the Council now meant vulnerability. In the Great Chamber, the High Chancellor finally spoke the words it had avoided for centuries. We must negotiate. The silence that followed was worse than outrage, because no one asked how. They asked with whom. And the answer was terrifying. Not Earth, not commanders, not generals, with the professionals. Because the galaxy was learning something the Council never had. Authority can be declared. Power can be inherited. But legitimacy is earned. And humanity had just rewritten the rules.
The Galactic Council had survived wars. It had survived rebellions, secessions, even extinction-level events. But it had never faced irrelevance. And now, irrelevance was spreading faster than panic ever could. The Great Chamber was full, yet hollow. Delegates sat in silence, staring at inactive holodisplays, screens that once showed trade flows, fleet readiness, and population stability. Now they showed nothing. Not because the data was hidden, because there was no data left to show. Supply chains had collapsed. Council fleets were grounded, not by damage, but by uncertainty. No one trusted their fuel calibrations. No one trusted their targeting systems. No one trusted the Council's assurances anymore. The High Chancellor finally understood. Humanity had not attacked the galaxy, they had exposed it. A junior delegate, young by galactic standards, broke protocol and spoke without recognition. "This isn't sabotage," they said quietly. "It's an audit." The word echoed. Audit. A human concept. Cold, methodical, unemotional, terrifying. The Chancellor turned slowly. "Then end it," they demanded. "Contact Earth, demand restoration." Another delegate shook their head. "They already contacted us." A single transmission appeared in the center of the chamber. No symbols, no flags, just a human face, unadorned, professional. "We are not here to negotiate power," the human said. "We are here to restore function." A pause. "You lost the ability to govern when you prioritized authority over responsibility." No accusation, just a statement. The Chancellor bristled. "You think you can replace the Council?" The human's expression didn't change. "No," they replied. "We think you can't." The chamber erupted. Outrage, threats, demands. The human waited. Professionals always wait. When the noise subsided, the human continued. "We will reopen trade corridors, only where civilian oversight exists." Another pause. "We will stabilize defense grids, only under transparent command." Another. "And we will withdraw completely, when you prove you can maintain these systems without exploiting them."
The Chancellor leaned forward. "And if we refuse?" The answer came immediately. "Then nothing changes." That was the moment the Council broke. Not with violence, with realization. They had no leverage, no fleets they could trust, no allies willing to enforce their will, and no narrative left that anyone believed. One by one, member species made announcements. Temporary withdrawal, independent stabilization agreements, bilateral coordination with humans, not Earth's government, human professionals. The Council still existed, but it no longer mattered. On Kellar, the sky finally cleared. Atmospheric engineers sealed the last breach. Power grids hummed back to life. Children returned to schools built inside repurposed shelters. And humans packed up. A Kellar official approached a human coordinator. "You saved us," they said. "Will you stay?" The human smiled gently. "That's not how this works." They gestured around. "You're stable now. Our job is done." Across the galaxy, the same pattern repeated. Humans arrived, fixed what was broken, refused titles, declined authority, then left. That terrified the old powers more than conquest ever could, because humanity didn't want to rule. They wanted the system to work. Back on Earth, Commander Hale watched reports scroll past. Stability indexes rising, conflict probabilities falling, council influence steadily, irrelevant. And Aide asked quietly, "Should we formalize control?" Hale shook his head. "No." "Then what do we call this?" Hale considered it, then answered, "Maintenance." The galaxy adapted, slowly, reluctantly, but inevitably. New treaties were written, not around dominance, but around accountability. New councils formed, smaller, transparent, temporary, and every single one of them had the same clause. In the event of systemic failure, human professional oversight may be requested, not required, requested. Centuries later, historians would debate the moment the old order ended. Some would point to the council's first strike, others to the paralysis that followed, but most would agree. It ended when humanity proved something simple. You don't need generals that win a war. You need professionals to prevent one. And in the end, the galaxy didn't fear Earth. It trusted it, because when everything fell apart, Earth didn't send rulers. Earth sent people who knew how to fix things.